Hello and welcome to the DM's Travel Book Club, a guide to the planes. Each episode, we explore one of the planes of existence as outlined in the Great Wheel Cosmology in the role-playing game Dungeons and Dragons. This week, we are looking at what, Fiona?
What are we looking at? Well, I believe we're looking at the plane of Limbo, this plane of pure chaos. It's sort of described as a rolling soup of impermanent matter and energy, which to me is that like soup of the day? Is that what? I just can't imagine what that is at all. It's a great. I'm really excited for this one.
I love that idea. Is it a soup of the day? Is it a soup of the day? Yes, it's a gazpacho. Yeah, it's quite great, isn't it? I have you enjoyed reading it? Before we get into what it is, have you enjoyed learning about Limbo? Because I definitely have, to be honest.
I was gonna say, yeah, you are definitely. I know that just from off camera we were talking about it, and you've got so many ideas for stuff. I think, my not issue. My thing is that I really struggle to imagine things, even with like overly descriptive stuff and all that sort of thing. So I had this issue with the abyss, just the idea it's infinite, and I really struggle to imagine what infinite is, because how can you imagine something that's infinite? The same with this. I just like it talks about it being like unpredictable. That is Limbo, right? It's just constant chaos, ever changing stuff, and as a result, I can't picture it. It must be like what it is to outside people looking at me doing all my projects all at the same time and all different. Like I know what's going on, but only because I know my bit of it, and then everything else. So I think it's like that. It's like an outside perspective on somebody who's got like a lot of stuff going on, and just that's how I see it. So
I just imagine it like a psychedelic trip, basically, that you see in a TV, and then like there's a band that I'll try if we can put their album art up called Amel and the Sniffers. Do you know them? They're sort of Australian punk band, very cool, and their front cover is like a glooped up face. It's like someone's gone like that all over it, basically with their thumb, and it's really cool. And I just imagine it's just like ever morphing, like when Bart Simpson and Milhouse drink the what's it called, the sugar drink, I've forgotten the name,
sugar drink, and they're just like
slush puppy basically without any water in it, and they start seeing that's how I imagine it, really. It's like
I guess funky on that, like maybe the images that come to mind when looking at Limbo, like we'll go into it in more detail in the description, but it's the idea like almost like a Salvador Dali painting. This idea just things are remelting and regrowing and changing and stuff like that. Everything is in flux. That is the main key thing.
Yeah, that's a Dali painting. Yeah, I feel like I think because do you ever know of an artist called De Chirico? I'm just looking to remind myself how you say it, De Chirico. Yeah, he's kind of like another like surrealist, but much more like, but it's all more like esoteric and like moody. It's not as like, it's got like big gloves and then like a pencil, and it's all very much in these moody settings. I feel that that's kind of like when someone we'll get onto an Anarch, like a basic level person's trying to create simple form of space is kind of like that, and then you get the Dali when you go like when you get a little bit lost control. But which is cool. All right, cool.
So I guess just this like again just to really just describe it, this idea of like it is just rolling chaos. Things are just changing all the time, and those people who do live there, like I know we'll go on to in more detail, this idea that you can control it, and only those who have the biggest sort of willpower or sort of mental capacity can do that and keep the surroundings in a stable condition, which is very, I guess, compared to, obviously it's a complete flip to what we know in like Forgotten Realms and the material plane. So it's just that idea that you have to constantly be concentrating just to be able to step one foot in front of the other, and the other is just so that to me as a DM coming to that, I'm like, oh god, there's gonna be a lot less stuff for me to keep track of. But I don't think so, actually. I think it's overwhelming at first, but I think once you've had a read of certainly this chapter and certainly about the plane in general, I think you've got some really good ideas there.
Yeah, no, I think so. And it's going back on the sort of like description of this sort of what the ever-changing is interesting in the sense that it's very elemental, and they talk about that quite a lot in the book, and they say, why is it elemental? It's connected to the astral plane, not the ethereal plane, which is where all the elements are in the sort of in the lower planes. And they say, well, it's chaos, so what do you want? Which is their sort of answer, which I like. But it's also quite, I think that sort of trying to keep people's like perspective on it a lot is that you can, if you wanted to explain it very easily, it's sort of one moment it might just be a big mound of earth that then turns into fire, that then becomes water, that then just becomes like a floating air bubble. And it's kind of, that sort of is a very simplified form of it, let alone, and it's sort of ever changing and flowing. And also reminding that this is, in terms of on the arc, is that this is completely on the ultimate chaos side. This is literally chaos, triple chaos, not
ridiculous amount of it.
Ridiculous amounts of chaos. Yeah. So
and I guess going on to the geography of it, for me, like one thing that stood out looking at it is that it just is, there's like, how do you describe it? And obviously we've talked about it as a soup of some sort or some sort of thing. There's a word over here was like a free floating mind within a thick stew, so like a broth composed of equally all elements, and these are chunks that are of different sizes and different purities but constantly changing. So I was just like, whoa, that is what summarized it to me. Like, it almost like you have to swim through it or suddenly walk through it, and just all these different densities and all different things.
Floating
and you don't know
through minestrone.
Yeah, it's minestrone soup, isn't it?
Yeah, it is exactly. Which someone's also blowing bubbles into at the same time. You're blowing bubbles into minestrone soup,
and it's boiling, and then it's cold, and then there's a whirlpool.
Exactly. Exactly, and I think that's quite cool. And then that is, and it says though, sort of like the key elements is like you will find elemental places, mixed elemental places, and then domains. And this is where we go back to that idea that people can control it, and then with their force of mind, be able to manipulate that and focus it into some sort of livable space. And some people can actually just breathe and float in that goop as well. But that's quite
Yeah, no, again, it was a comment saying that monsters and raiders here on this plane have to be very adaptable, and as a result, they are very difficult to stamp out. So it's that sort of thing, was that if you're having a fight on Limbo, like you don't know how it's one of those random encounters. It's going to be just suddenly very, very difficult, and you don't know if you've got the right stuff for it, because these creatures, again, it's that idea that they're constantly evolving or changing or something like that. So I think if I was running in a combat and they were fighting something, that these creatures would be flavored in such a way that if they've got regeneration processes, okay, another arm comes out or another head, or suddenly they've changed into so that they can swim or anything like that. Just again, maybe a little more prep as a DM, but I just love that idea. It's like, these creatures are adaptable to this really harsh, almost, I guess, it's a very insurvivable. That's not even a word, but it's just that like, how can you survive in something that is just constantly changing? And
when like we have a biology which is based on adapting to your environment, and this is an environment that's ever changing. So how can it's hard for us to even comprehend how that sort of creature is, unless it's like a cockroach which supposedly survives in everything. But there is an interesting point on that with this sort of the fact that there are some things that can breathe and swim in this sort of unshaped chaos matter, that it does note that sometimes people, bashers as it says in this, have this innate ability, and it only shows up when you get dumped into it, and if your character is only of chaotic alignment, and you have to pass a wisdom check and fail a saving throw versus paralyzation, which is basically fail a saving throw against spell effect. Basically, you'd have to change it because there's no such thing as paralyzation now. But basically, you could just do it as a wisdom check for anyone who's chaotic, and then they might. And I think it's basically if you roll a 20, it doesn't actually give you a number in this. I couldn't find it, but I think you could set that DC as a DM and allow at least one of your chaotic players to have a chance at being able to just not have to even control the land around them, which could be quite useful.
That'd be, And just to quickly go back to you, so you said like this idea of all these different pockets of terrain as well, and I quite like the descriptions of them. So obviously we talked about primal soup, but other things on this menu of Limbo, we've got solid earth, fire pocket, water bubble, air pocket, and then something just called mixed elements.
Yes, exactly.
Actually, I like it's like maybe the token salad of the group, and it's just like you just put all these things together and just find out what happens.
Yeah, exactly.
But I quite liked how it broke it down into those sections, because you're like, obviously he's like, I guess this could happen, and this could happen, and just again, if you were just making it out like they're traveling from one environment to the other, you could just be rolling randomly and be like, okay, you're now on fire. Oh, and there's water, but no air. Oh no!
Oh dear.
Whoopsie.
Yeah, exactly. And what do you do in that? Do you have to have breathe air or breathe water in that as a spell in that scenario? I don't know. That's
who knows? Yeah, well, that's it, isn't it? Again, it's that sort of thing. If you are, I guess, because obviously fighter or non-spell classes are, can only fight and just do what they can. But if you're a spellcaster, you're like, how do you even prep? Like, I feel like going to Limbo is you don't do it on purpose unless we'll go on to it, like, unless you're a Githzerai perhaps, and you're going or Githzerai, sorry, or if you're going back to find something, and maybe we'll talk about some ideas for adventure hooks later. But I just like that idea, like if you were here, you can't plan.
You're probably either ending up there by accident, or you're going directly to a realm. To
you hope you get to directly to a realm, because that's the other thing, is that you could just end up in somewhere completely different, because the portals,
it's chaos.
The portals disappear and appear at will, which is just amazing.
Yeah, so we should probably talk about how you can travel around in Limbo. So as you said, there were portals, and the portals are not so fixed. So it might be, even in Sigil, you might have a portal that goes through one door and it might move to a different door at some point. But at least to a certain extent on the Sigil side, it probably stays fixed. But where it then goes to in the Limbo side probably doesn't. There are obviously Anarchs, which we'll talk about more, who are able to control all this chaos, and we'll get onto that, how they make that work. There are also things that they do, which is they create moments in these realms which you can look, which are like locator objects, and then if you cast locate object at the same time, that can help you to sort of guide yourselves, and you can use these things they're called Gideons, is the word, or guidons. I don't know.
I like the word Gideons, but I don't know either. This idea of like magical obelisks in the center of town. I just see them as like either like obviously like a big signpost or a big arrow or something, like going here, meet me here at this town.
It's a guidon, not a Gideon. I put my eyes in the wrong place. That's me being dyslexic. That's it. It's a guidon. But anyway, cool obelisk in the center of town, which is like something that and then you can buy little trinkets that sometimes have locate object always cast on them to locate you there. So you can go, as I said, so there's the sort of portals way. You can then go through things that are like, it has its own tunnels, what they called the tunnel pathways, which are basically
conduits as well. This idea of like almost like a wormhole type thing, which I just so cool. But I've written down here, look before you leap, because you're like, what's down there? Oh no, it's fire.
Because you kind of look through it, and somehow it does show you what's at the end of it, and then you can jump through. But then it also does say sometimes it might change halfway through if you're at the wrong time. So they're quite interesting. And then obviously there's spells like teleport without ever is probably the only one that's good, whilst because other teleports then become under the issues of other spells, which makes it more of a problem.
So so this was quite interesting, because it talks about like plant door or transport via plants, and have like a member of party will a plant into existence, which I guess we can just briefly touch on. So again, we've talked about this idea of having this sort of mental capacity to control your environment, but that means you can also create certain things as well. So that idea is like, you can just like, okay, you're going to work on creating a tree or something like that, and then just being able to use that as a way to move into places as well, so that you can create an escape route essentially. So again, if you're having that huge fight with this horrific like monster, you're like, okay, let's get the escape rope vine door or something, like let's go, and then get out and stuff like that, which I just thought, again, flavoursome. That's really cool that you can just create that. But again, a bit of planning perhaps, but as an escape route or a quick way out. Yeah,
because if you are able to remember a tree in a hometown base or a base town in Limbo, then you always can get back there. Basically, it's like a teleport circle. Yeah, exactly
that. So let's talk about the population then of Limbo. What strange, cool denizens can we hang out with in Limbo?
You hang out with the craziest and coolest, and that there are in the world, pretty much. They only get probably more crazy in Pandemonium, but there are the big ones. Then, so as with everything, there are powers, petitioners, and proxies, which is just like anyone. That's the sort of the sort of religious part of it, isn't it? There's always some gods, and we will probably get onto those, and their sort of there's not many proxies because they're a bit too chaotic to even care to do that, to go outside of their realm. But there are people who have that chaotic nature, who live in whose souls then obviously go and end up in Limbo, and become one with the plane, and in that they become chaos elementals, which are cool. Which is basically ever changing and ever deconstructing into to examples of like different animals, or they turn into a lump of primal chaos matter, in the sense that one minute they might just be a pillar of flame, a misty wind of air, a dashing wave of water, a column of rock, or some mix of these things.
I love a dashing wave of air. That's just like
exactly. And that they are, interestingly, they're sort of like, they're fascinated with stories, so they might be persuaded to help someone if you can tell them a nice story and keep their interest, because as they're chaotic, they're a little bit like, they might lose focus halfway through and find something else more interesting.
Done now, bored.
Yeah, I'm bored now, and now I'm going to be a column
Like,
flyer.
yeah, I guess it's like when you tell a story to a small child, like, bored now, no
Yeah,
more.
exactly. Yeah.
End.
Exactly. So I can imagine them being, oh, now you've done that, I'm just imagining them going, why, every 5 seconds.
Of course, that would be yes. Every NPC that is this sort of like you said, that sort of elemental style, or that changing chaos has that sort of childlike. Why?
But why?
How?
Yeah, exactly. And then when you give up on the game, they're like, no, I'm bored now. And they're off.
Yeah, bored now.
Yeah,
Nice try.
I'm gonna play Lego.
Yeah, just fill it. I'm gonna play Lego, and then they just turn into like a whole ton of Lego bricks.
Exactly. So those are the sort of key the key sort of like non sort of creatures, and then the sort of two main creatures, I guess, are the Slardy and then the sort of the race of the Githzerai. So the Slardy, you've talked about the Slardy before, haven't you?
I have, yeah, with our good friend Derek from How Not to DM. We talked about them for an episode where basically we were picking out creatures we'd put into like a Halloween one shot, and I think the Slardy are just, again, their whole backstory is so cool. This idea that they have been spawned in Limbo because is he called? I know we're going to get to this. Primus. I was going to go Primal. Primus comes and is like, I will make sure that there's no more chaos here, and then buggered up. And it was like, cool, I'm just going to leave it now and leave. I just love that as a story. And then these creatures come out, these evil creatures. And again, for me, they're like, they look very frog-like, or with teeth and different colours. And they have this whole like hierarchy, and that different colours do different things. You know, some of them are spellcasters and stuff. This idea that you have like Death Slards, the sort of the highest in the hierarchy, and that they can only become Death Slards if they eat each other, essentially. And it's just like, what is going on here? There's just so much to them. I just think they are so bloody cool as a sort of an evil force that feel alien. Like there's just something about them that gives you think, oh, frogs, oh, they're gonna be small like bullywugs or something like that. No, these things are big and they are mean. And like they have the whole thing of like impregnating you and all that sort of thing. It's just great, love them. I think they're great.
I like the saying that it puts in there, which is fight a Slard and lose, the story's over. Fight a Slard and win, there's 1,000 more standing in line just to prove they're tougher.
Yes,
and that kind of puts their sort of hierarchy, because it says that, you know, that they will run together as packs, but they won't attack together in combat. So if you fight one, they'll send they will probably send the weakest one at you, and then once you beat that, they'll send the next weakest, the next strongest, until you literally, and then if you beat all of them, then the news will get back to get the bigger one that will come along and beat you.
Call for the grey Slard.
Yeah, exactly. And then you just hear boom. So it's like a horde mode you could have, isn't it? If you wanted that sort of game, just like red Slard, green Slard, blue Slard, grey Slard, Death Slard.
And then Death Slard is the final wave.
Yeah,
exactly.
My goodness. If you can handle that.
I don't know. I mean, they're crazy creatures. Just like the stat blocks, I highly recommend looking them up and putting them in a game. I think if I was running a game in Limbo, I would definitely have a Slard in there somewhere, even if it's just in the background. It's like slowly coming up, and they're like, "We need to get out of here."
Yeah.
It's a massive toad.
Yeah.
Fuck. What about the Githzerai then? As a comparison piece, obviously we have the Slard, who are you know, these evil monstrous creatures, and there's Githzerai then. What about them?
So the Githzerai, they were originally part of the Gith as a whole, which was they were humanoids that were humans that were taken under control, enslaved by the Illithids for a long
Blooming
time.
mind flayers again.
Bloody mind flayers, mapping it
everywhere.
up.
I know.
And they were freed by Gith, the great female warrior, and then the Githzerai and the Githyanki split when the Zerthimon went and rose up against Gith, saying that she was a bit of a warmonger and didn't want to, and said that they're going to had a vision that they were going to be led down an evil path forever, and so they split in two. How the Zerthimon was killed, and the Githzerai went and hid in Limbo, basically, whilst the Githyanki remain in the astral plane, hanging out and fighting Illithid as much as possible.
Yeah, and that whole story again, like that's in it's in Volo's Guide to Monsters, I think. That whole sort of history of it is absolutely fascinating, and would highly recommend reading it, because both the Githyanki and Githzerai have very different structures and obviously ideals and stuff like that. But you do think to yourself, not one. You think, which one would you prefer? And the answer is neither of them, because they both have really like corrupt leaders at the top, and it's just fascinating how they've kept onto these power struggles. Certainly the Yankee, which I won't go into too much detail here because that's obviously not. It's about Limbo, but just this idea that the woman at the top there is sending these people out, and it's glory and battle and stuff. And when they come back and retrieve stuff, she sucks her life essence out because she is a lich in disguise, and it's just I love all that stuff. But
is she? I didn't know that.
Well, spoilers. Yes, she is. It's a similar sort of thing to what the Githzerai are. So obviously, their leader is sort of, it's like very sort of Egyptian style sort of mummy god in a way. Like this person has so much psionic power that they are so they've aged so much they can't physically move, and so you see these amazing pictures of the Githzerai sort of worshipping or sort of like attending to this sort of mummy-like creature in a sarcophagus, but it's so powerful and so evil. It's just I love it.
So this is
so cool.
their current leader, which is the great Githzerai god king Zareth Menyar-Agith.
I believe so. Yes. Again, depending on the edition as well, they might have changed the names and stuff. But yeah, pretty much it treats as a god king. So very much that whole sort of thing, like the worship. His word is law, and then and again, and obviously, well, not obviously, but the Githyanki, they sort of put their principles and pride in physical prowess and sort of fighting and stuff like, where the Githzerai obviously are sort of more magical and psionic and manipulating matter.
There was a really so they have that innate because they're very highly intelligent, it says, and with that they also have in one of their cities that we talk about, they have it's ruled by the Thieves Guild, basically. The floating city, which is so they've got one which is a military city, which we will cover, which is
floating city,
and the which is Shraklaw, which is the military one, which has 2 million persons in it, which is a big city. And then the floating city is one where we've got magic and the Thieves' Justice, which is which maintains order. And supposedly this god king promotes thieving as a positive trait, because it's about subterfuge and manipulation and doing shock tactic raids and stuff like that on the Githyanki. But also he maintains that no wizard can get over 9th level of wizard, basically. So he only allows his closest persons to get any better than that. And one person that it does put in there, it called Moran, is pretending that she doesn't know how to do spells. She's like, crap at it, but is still learning more and more from all his books and getting higher level spells, but she's pretending. That
could be an amazing plot hook, that you just arrive, but you are in the middle of suddenly an incursion. This person has just gone, all right, my time is now, and and you're just in the middle going, well, it's time. What are we gonna do? Like, oh God. I just very cool. But I will say, just finishing off on populations, the one thing that I thought was really cool, actually. So of course we have these towns, or we have these places in this roiling chaos. Like, how are they not torn apart? And it's just this idea that they have groups of watchmen, the people, the city sort of council people, and they just take turns literally being on guard, but focusing on the town's existence. Which I was like, whoa. And I know we'll get onto it later. There's a place called Barnstable, which is like this halfling village, but there was a little thing in it saying, like, the youngsters who go on watch love playing tricks on the other villagers and move around the streets and houses so that they are in the same place when you wake up. And I was like, that's such a fun, I love that little flavoursome thing that you could just shift that, like, I don't like that fountain there, I'm gonna put it over here.
That'll look better. An aspiring architect or urban designer.
Just have the constant shifting of town. You're like, there's no one's agreeing on it, and the people paying the council people to, I want that extension, all that sort of thing.
So, and actually, you remind me, you didn't go on to more detail of these Anarchs then, which you could be. So, an Anarch is someone who has the ability, whilst unconscious as well, to manage reality. So you can roll, which if you're an Anarch, you both have the ability to breathe and and swim in the elemental chaos because you basically can control it naturally, just to be able to make it air when it breathes, it comes into your lungs basically, and be able to make it liquid whilst you move forward. But with that, it's so if you're not an Anarch, you can only control it when you're conscious. So if you do not have one in your party, you have to be on watch and and have a relatively high intellect. So if you've got a party of 3 fighters maybe who may not have high intellect scores, you might then need to your spellcaster's gonna have to stay up a bit late at night.
Some late nights and early mornings. Yes,
exactly.
Absolutely.
And it gives you a good table for what that is and how much you can do that. But that which is all very interesting. So being a spellcaster can be beneficial. However, casting spells cannot be. But we'll come on to that later.
Yes. And just to finish quickly on that as well, because there was this idea, we talked about it earlier, that once you arrive in the in Limbo, you could probably gain that sort of innate ability to breathe and swim in the soup. But then I quite liked it talked about this idea of a chaos shaping proficiency when you leveled up. Yeah. So having that because when you're maybe when you're running campaigns and stuff you like to give special things to your players that you have this that nobody else has. So I quite like that as a thing, saying you want to do that, just roll a shape chaos roll, to say that, and because you can do that with stuff like D&D Beyond, you can easily add proficiencies for other things. I quite like that, just having proficiencies that you wouldn't expect in a normal campaign. We have it like using magic tech or I don't know, firearm proficiency and all that sort of thing. Exactly. You don't necessarily get that sort of thing. But one specific to this plane is shaping chaos, which you'll never use anywhere else.
You never know. If you're a good DM, you'll try and find another way for it to work, won't you? I guess maybe.
So there's a fight in the pub about to happen. Just shape chaos roll for me, please.
Well, I wonder if you could do that. If you can be able, when there is chaos going on, you can manipulate a chaotic crowd to do your bidding. You know what I mean? You could make it so that if there's a stampede of people, you could use your shape chaos roll to be able to find a path through, like Morpheus in the Matrix.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
When they're walking through the crowd.
It does feel very Matrix, doesn't it? That you just make things appear, or you can fly, you can do I hadn't thought of that. That's a great example, actually, that you create the world around you through shaping it like that. I love that. And I guess, and then in that case, Inception would be the other example as well. Yeah. Cool. So let's briefly talk, because we sort of, we did talk about it a little bit, but this idea of politics as well. So I guess most of it would revolve around the Githzerai, just because that's the biggest one. I think Slard, we have that sort of hierarchy thing going on, and it is each for themselves with these sort of, we talked about those sort of elemental sort of creatures that sort of whim. I assume they are quite selfish and all, that sort of thing, unless it's you go from town to town and then deliberately do that rather than an overarching thing. But with the Githzerai, most of that is going to be focusing on what the Githyanki are doing and doing the raids and stuff like that. So again, for me, I would be like, okay, you don't, unless you had, I think we were talking about it before, if you have a Githzerai, it makes sense that you would go and visit Limbo. But if you didn't, I like this idea that you are going in and you are in the middle of a war, but you're not entirely sure what, which side is, what's going on. And suddenly if the Githyanki appear in the Limbo, so I think there's a lot to do with that idea of that power struggle between two powers, but one of them isn't a part of the plane.
Exactly, and you're very much out of it completely. Your ability to understand and comprehend it would be limited if you weren't one of them, which is kind of interesting.
Yes.
And also,
and they wouldn't want you a part of it either. They're like, get out of the way.
Exactly, and with that, there are areas in all these cities which are Githzerai is actually quite a nice way of saying it, so I might use that now. Githzerai. Only areas that are more the religious one has a high tower in the center in the floating city which you can't get to, and then in the military one there's obviously they're not going to let you in, not just going to go inside the main military base, are you? You wouldn't
can't
do
just
that.
walk in. No,
can't just walk in. But I think it's quite interesting, and it's but it's very what I gather from it, because we didn't talk about, like I said, in the magical one, he controls magicians so they can't get over 9th level, and then in the generals one, with the military one, it's the God King, he directs generals in plotting endless measures to keep weaken the Githyanki. The generals of the city like to believe that as the driving force behind the Githzerai vengeance, it is they who rule the city. Of course, they do so in the service of the God King. But what it does is, he says that they all struggle amongst themselves, and he promotes that idea of them all fighting one another, so that they don't all band together and go, time to overthrow.
We need, it's each person for themselves.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of it just shows that I just think of it very much like you've got to think that this political structure is very much backstabby, very much Death of Stalin sort of.
Yes, that's a
know
very good example, actually. Yeah, that idea that oh no, this thing's happened, and it's that almost sort of thing like we're banding together, but it's for our own, and then getting one over on each other. I love that idea.
And even if you're working together, the other hand has got the dagger behind the back, whereas is passing a note to the other person, who's passing a note to the other person, that sort of thing. And I think that's kind of makes that very interesting. And with the fact that they have, they promote the sort of thieving and that sort of idea that, teacher skills useful for acquiring out information and stuff like that, when you're walking down the street, if you're not, which this happens not only in this place, but you might just find that you've just been pickpocketed like all the time.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of the other thing, which is if you don't keep an eye on if you have artifacts on you, they might get lost to the chaos as well, which is fun to remember.
Yeah, I love this idea of like a mini Flux thing. We were talking about it before. This idea that because you concentrate on, if you would, again, we sort of passed over it, but that you could also travel across Limbo just by putting one foot in front of the other and going and just creating that bubble of however long for you, and obviously concentrating on that, which is very hard going. But as a result, if you're just concentrating on yourself, like when I think of myself, I'm like, okay, the physical, whatever, I've got a bag. Would I concentrate on all the bits of stuff in my bag? Would I concentrate on like having my glasses? Would I concentrate on having my pencil case? No. And as a result, I could open the bag and like, oh, there's a potato in here instead, or oh, it's just sand. Oh no.
As someone who loses everything generally, I would leave with a bag and end up with a massive potato. Probably that was all I'd have on my back, and then it would turn into like a frog at some point, and then it would be
and it's like a slard. Oh.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, I mean I'm just so forgetful of things that my bag would just not be the same.
But I like that as another sort of threat to the players that isn't combat based. It is the threat of losing equipment or losing things and items that may not seem very important to them at the time, but like losing rations, losing like the scabbard or something, or like I had some more arrows here and all that sort of thing. Just little bits and pieces just to really sort of home it in that these things are so changeable. You're like, oh, you forgot this thing. It's just like almost like losing time in a way, which I just really like.
Exactly.
Well, let's go on then to sort of the magical conditions then, because we sort of briefly talked about it. So obviously, spellcasting is chaotic as a rule. In the Planes of Chaos book, it talks about this idea of like you make an intelligence check before casting a spell, and if you fail it, you lose that spell slot, and then a wild magic surge appears as the chaos sort of takes that and turns it into something else. And I love that idea. It will be a lot to remember as a DM, but if you put it on your players, like you need to do this every single time, it's great. And it talks about like all schools of magic have this chance to set off a wild magic surge, and it always happens if you're in sort of the primal soup thing, that sort of terrain. And I just thought, I guess because that makes sense, because the chaos is so pungent, so around you, you're so connected to it that it's like literally like oil. If you do a flame, it's going to go off all around you. I just, again, flavor wise, sounds amazing, but also chaotic as heck.
Yeah, no. And as someone who has a wild magic sorcerer as the party's DM PC, basically DM NPC, whatever, is going to be interesting when I end up there. And I love that I've got I got to recommend the is it Orm 2 does a wild magic surge rework, and it's very good for people who are doing Planescape, because it does have a chaos effect, and you can do it you can also use it when you're not on a chaotic plane to charge up chaos. But what's quite good is it gives you like, when you're on a chaotic plane and when you're on a neutral plane, it does more things. So we have it. So like, for example, if you get everyone becomes invisible, if you're on a neutral plane, it will just be 2 minutes. If you're on a lawful plane, it will be exactly so what it is. And if it's on a neutral, it might be like half an hour. And then if it's a super chaotic plane, it's like 2 hours or 8 hours, so you just get these effects so we had ours where they turned illusory for 2 hours, which is just like, what the heck, how do you deal with that?
That is chaotic as heck.
And I think that's great. And I found, and the thing, it has some really ones in there, like 8 badgers do whatever spell you were going to do, but they perform the spell. So if it was like a healing spell, you get 8 badgers come and sew up your wounds, which is just amazing, right? Who doesn't want more badgers in their game?
Agreed.
They're such cute. So
I guess because again, maybe it's that sort of thing where because a lot of times we have this ideal versus expectation versus reality, right? So we expect these heroes to be amazing, or like ridiculous and heroic and stuff, and then you play your actual game and you're all
idiots.
like idiots
Basically.
in armor going, what are we going to do? And I like that this, if you're in Limbo, it takes it to the extreme, because it's like, okay, and now you're attacked by pufferfish. You're like, what? You're just gonna have to roll with it. And it is definitely that thing for me as an improviser. It's like yes anding everything, and it does. You can't. And the justification is like, it's chaos, and you're like, I have to accept that. And it's, I guess it's such a different way than just saying, oh, it's magic or science. This is like, it's chaos. You can't understand it. It's happening, and just that joy of it happening and going, that's what I would want. If the players did it, they want to be excited about what that magic.
What I was going to do for mine was that I was going to let the players do so much more of the description, because I was going to say, you do it from your character. What would your character's mental? Because it's like one of them, it says if when it goes wrong, sometimes it might shape into something which is their worst nightmare or something like that. And when it's something, so like, you've got to. I think this is a great moment for collaborative storytelling, because it's just like, no, you tell me how you shape this world. Like it's a soup. All I'm going to tell you is it's a soup of your creation, because it's your creation. You tell me what you see, because that's the best way to do it, because that's what it would be.
I like that, because that definitely makes sense for Limbo for sure, because it's just like, again, because it's constantly changing, and maybe it's that sort of thing where it changes differently for different people as well, and that different and stuff. I like that, because going slightly back to that geography thing, it talks about layers, as we've talked about in other planes. It said various layers. If it does have layers, it doesn't adhere to the scholar's definition of layers. And I'm like, brilliant. And you know what, we've not really mentioned this in the previous episodes, but each one of these chapters feels like it's written by a different hand of somebody who had actually been to these things. And I really felt it with this one, because it's like as if there's like, I don't know why you're asking me, there's no layers, why are you asking me, compared to like Arborea, or even the Abyss obviously has infinite layers. But I just thought that was really interesting, that the style, certainly going through the Planes of Chaos book, it was like, it feels very different. It feels like a travel book in a way that people have sent in their experiences. So I really enjoyed that as a result.
No, it's really good actually, and I think we've said many times that like the writing and the quality of writing in all of these older books that we've read. Not saying that the new books aren't as good. It's just there is definitely a really great voice in these books, which is actually quite. I agree. When we're on spells, I do love the spell keys for this land, because
go for it.
On some places, it's on the more lawful planes, they're much more physical objects. Sometimes, like a spell key might literally be a key or an object, like a talisman of some kind. But here, they have two categories. The first involves the essence of change, and the second, the essence of balance. So you use the essence of change for alteration, enchantment, illusion, and then you use balance for the others, which I will find here: abjuration, conjuration, and invocation or evocation. And what I love is that to make something changeable, it is literally just put a pinch of salt in some water.
Oh, cool.
So it's just like, find a moment of change. So just allow your players like this little bit of like little mini sort of thought experiment for them to do, of like, okay, so maybe just burning a bit of paper, or anything of that ilk, anything that you can think that changes, like maybe dissolving something is a great one as well. But the other one would be, and the balance one might be just spinning a coin when you're doing
or
the
a
spell,
top or something like that.
Exactly, like in Inception. Oh my gosh, he clearly was. Or balancing a dagger on a pointed fingertip, like
House of Cards.
Yes,
you
House of Cards.
And it just all falls down and little chaos reigns.
And as it says, as them holding an egg or a fragile glass sphere aloft to balance on like a staff would make it better for more powerful moments. So you've just got to like do like a dex check. So I've got like a arcane trickster, so they've got high dex, high intelligence. So for them, this is like perfect, and they're chaotic. So like, my gosh, what more could you want? So they're just gonna, I can imagine, do me a sleight of hand check for balancing a dagger whilst you're trying to cast a spell. Like.
Okay,
you know what I mean? It's
chaos.
Lovely.
That's so
it means that they don't have to use that intelligence check to make the spell work. You can use something else, like you use that intelligence check basically to make that sort of, what could I do to make the spell work, is kind of how it's seen. Whilst the other one, it could be like, well, if you've got another option, like do me an acrobatics check to see if you can balance on the top of someone's head whilst doing a spell, like something like that.
And again, it's like yes-anding it, because you're like, it's the only way you're going to do this. You're like, okay, that's what you do in the moment, and it might not be the right thing to do, or you're like, this doesn't make sense. I don't, I guess for me, ultimately, I know, and I keep going back to this, it's the idea that this Limbo is going to take your players out of this comfort zone that they have, so they have to think outside the box. With all these planes, you're going to have to think outside the box, but I think here, because everything changes.
Have to more than the
It's compared to changing, say, if you're in a combat and a lair action happens once a turn at the top of initiative or whatever. This time the lair changes at the end of every turn that you have, and it may be a lot to run, but I just like that idea going, you're going to be out of your comfort zone, you just got to have to think on your feet and don't worry about what anyone else is doing, because by the time it gets to their turn, it's going to be something different. So I love all that. I
like this. Limbo, the plane of improv.
Yeah. What? Yes. And something comes towards you. Let's sort of round off then with notable features. So the one thing that I really, really got me thinking, I guess, was that the chaos matter itself can't produce animals, and animals themselves, like living creatures, can't be willed into existence. So all the animals you see are either native to the plane in some way, or they've been transplanted in. So for me, that makes me think of like having, if that you don't see rabbits or anything like that, or the small creatures like that, but you've got cows and horses, but they are at a high price and commodity that you have to look at. They're almost sacred in a way. So I wondered about, like, if you had to do some cattle herding, if you were going to go for a job in Limbo, that you need to get the herd of cattle from one township to another, how do you do that? How do you do it and not lose them and all that sort of thing, which I know seems very basic perhaps as an adventure hub in the material plane, but on Limbo, where anything can happen, and it's it's almost like an escape room puzzle sort of thing, where you have to figure out how do you take one cow across and then come back with the sheep, and then the wolf can't be there and all that sort of thing. So I hadn't considered that you can create living matter like trees and plants and will that sort of thing, but you can't create animals. I just thought, interesting.
I think it's worth noting that you can, if you've got an intelligence level of 19 or higher, you can will animals into existence, but only those native to Limbo. I just want to clarify that, because you can. So which could be dangerous, because if you're getting a bit scared, I hope a Slardy doesn't turn up. Oh fuck. Oh shit, what have I done?
It's very much like Ghostbusters thing, saying, what did you think of? And I thought, State Puff Marshmallow Man.
Choose your choose your I can't remember the word, choose your destroyer or something like that, isn't it? And
nobody think of anything.
Amazing. That is amazing.
Yeah. What about you? Was there any notable features that you were like, this is really cool? I mean, we talked a lot about how cool Limbo is, but was there anything for you per se?
I mean, I think we have talked about most of the sort of chaotic things that are great, and I think that the settlements are really fun. The one that I actually enjoy as a settlement, but it's very different, and is actually the sort of antithesis of it, and there's something that it's sort of it's something that goes on with Barnstable as well. I just love how it's called Barnstable.
Yes, that's
for English
my favourite.
People out here, if anyone who's not in England, you will not find it as funny as us, because Barnstable is an actual place in England, and it's sort of all right. It's sort of okay. It's just funny that it just proves the fact that Americans think we're all halflings.
Yes, that is pretty much. So just to clarify, that Barnstable is this halfling village that has been sucked into Limbo due to a rogue magic surge, and they're just still living there, trying to just keep going along.
I'm going to make it the actual Barnstable is.
I think you should.
That's what I'm going to do. It's literal Barnstable from North Devon is canonly taken into Limbo. Anyway, I have a friend from there, places. But anyway, but there's a thing called Fenimar, which is the realm of Fenmarel Mestarine, the elven god of innocent scapegoats and outcasts, which I think is an interesting god to be. And it actually resonates, because in some respects, the story of the character that is the proxy in there, the principal non-player, Avery Aronson, is literally the backstory for one of my first D&D characters.
Oh, really? How funny.
Who was a ranger, elf ranger in a town. It went away, tribe went and destroyed it, and he got blamed for it. And then went on. I was like, "That's my character."
That's
me. That's me.
You're doing the Spider-Man going, huh?
Yeah, that exactly. It's that Spider-Man. So I kind of had an affinity to the place just because of that, and but also it's like I like the idea of it. It's basically like a testing ground for people who want to people who have been caused outcasts or scapegoats innocently, been given, been what's the word, accused of things wrongfully, is a place for them to go. But also it's a place for else to come when they're trying to hone their skills at like wood law, as they call it, which is for like them being in a more populous realm. So it's somewhere where you can have a bit more control over certain parts of it, so you can go and test your skills at ranging and hunting and stuff.
Yes.
With the exception that its chaoticness comes in the fact that the weather is extremely changeable, and at one moment it might be heavy rain and boiling hot, and then be freezing cold and blue skies, and tempests and stuff could just turn, change on a dime. But there are lots of people in the area very positive, and it has little like hideouts for people to go. So I kind of see it as like a nice little starter point for someone who wants to go and do some ranging. I don't know. I kind of like it. It's like a little...
I think it's interesting because you can compare that weather stuff to the Arborea, because obviously in Arborea has similar sort of things that the weather can kill you, but it's all about the emotions of the land and stuff like that. Whereas here, it's nothing emotional. It is just it's on random, right? It's on shuffle.
It's on shuffle. Yes.
So I like that idea. Like again, you're trying to get to Arborea, and then you land in this place because you've been driven off course, something like that, and you're like, well, it feels like Arborea, and then you're like, I don't.
That's
think
a good little adventure hook, isn't it? Like you think you're trying to travel to Arborea, you have this thing in your mind, you use the spell key, and it somehow just a limbo effect comes in, and you end up there. But it's I kind of like it. The interesting thing, additional to it, which I quite like, is and something that Barnstable does as well, which is it creates a mountainous region around it to protect it from Slardy invaders, to kind of keep it safe. And the thing that Barnstable does as well is, because people are always keeping an eye on it, and it's covered in this, it's a big great tree, but there's also a little forest around it, is that when they see Slardy come, they sort of they change the surroundings, so it's like a really dense thicket that you just can't get through, and the city is contained in the middle. And so there's that sort of benefit of like talking about that is that you might see some Slardy coming. If your characters are intelligent enough, you might go create a maze, like do a Lady of Pain on them and just go maze.
Yeah, or like a cornfield maze, or boop, like Hampton Court. Boop.
Exactly, and then just literally give that time for you to run away. I know they can also control it as well, but it's like it's a spell save against spell save sort of thing going on, which could be quite fun.
A siege at Barnstable would be amazing to play out. I'm here for it.
The Great Siege of
Barnstable. Why not? I love that. Oh well, thank you so much, Hamilton. Obviously our third plane in this series, and I don't know. It's getting tricky now because obviously, like I said to you before, I really struggle to differentiate these planes. But going through them, I really like Limbo. I think that could be a really fun one to do. Just again, that for me as a GM, it feels overwhelming at first because you're like, I have to think of stuff. But I guess as long as you've got your table of randomized magic surges, if you've got a little bit of a plan, and then you can just give it out to the players and go, okay, can you roll? Just why don't you roll whatever it is, and you're in charge of this bit, or you're in charge of this bit, and then every so often, like if you have a timer going, okay, it's been 50 minutes. When was the last time you thought about your rucksack? Oh, okay, cool. Half the stuff in it has changed.
Half the stuff in it is potatoes. Everything is now potatoes, by the way. That's what.
Yeah, no, I know. I reached for a carb and I went for potatoes, and that's all. Again, because I'm just thinking of soup, and I'm just thinking of food, because that's this great image of the soup. So yes, they come to Limbo, try the soup. It's changeable.
Exactly. It's always different. Yeah, you can't be bored, that's for sure. So, Fiona, now that we've done Limbo, where are we? Now we've survived Limbo. We've got out of the chaos. We've used our huge intellects that we have.
We're doing our Professor X look.
And we've solved the puzzle. We've got ourselves found a portal. We're now hopping onto the next plane of chaos.
Yes.
So we're sticking with chaos.
We're still sticking with chaos.
Next?
Where are we going? So, next time we are going to be looking at the plane of Pandemonium, a plane of madness, a great mass of rock riddled with tunnels carved by howling and maddening winds, which I'm excited for, because I believe that's the one that they used in Critical Role for one of their one shots, and it is.
Oh really? Oh right.
It's pretty. It's the hunt, the search for Grog. I believe he was.
Oh, I haven't done this yet. That's the one I'm saving till when I finish Critical Role 1 again, because I run that. Yeah.
So it's very enjoyable. So if you wanted a quick taste of what Limbo, we've done Limbo. What the Pandemonium is, go check out the Search for Grog with Critical Role, because I think that's a really good a primer, essentially, if you wanted to run a campaign, if you ever want to go to Pandemonium. But yes, so that's the one we're looking at next, which I'm very excited for. But until then, you can subscribe to us on our YouTube channel and catch up on previous episodes and VODs of our sibling show, the DM's Book Club. And we've got links to places, and obviously I'm sure we've got tons of other things happening as well. So just come say hi and check us out. And I don't know, jump more planes with us, I guess. I don't know.
Go, let's go. See you on the flip side of the plane chart.
Yeah.
How about that? All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.